start. Kaj Nygren, the CTO of MAG Interactive, is coming up to share with you what happened when one of their games exploded across the world and how they dealt with the situation. Please welcome Kaj.
Right, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kaj Nygren, as he said. I'm the CTO of MAG Interactive, and what I'm going to talk to you about today is handling extreme growth or how we managed to scale our game Russell from 0 to like 50 million users in a very short period of time. So who are we? Well, MAG Interactive is a mobile game development company. We were based in Stockholm in Sweden. We like to think that we sit a few hundred meters from King, whereas people here like to think that they sit just underneath of King. We have a bit of a debate of where if King is like a Swedish company or an English company. But anyway, we were founded back in 2010. We are currently like 27 employees, and we're hoping to double that in 2014, this year. So we have 2 games live. As I said, we have a game called Ruzzle, a word game, with a bit over like 50 million users. We also have a quiz game, kind of like the little brother of Ruzzle, which is, so it has something like 6 million users, something like that. We also actually have a new game in pre-launch phase called Ruzzle Adventure, which is a follow-up to Ruzzle. So it's currently in soft launch in Sweden. We launched it a few days ago, and it's doing pretty well. It's like currently #1 on the Play or on the App Store in games in Sweden. So that's pretty exciting. But anyway, I guess most of you here are either interested in games or like game developers. And if you're like a game developer, and especially if you're like a game developer in the mobile space, you want to hit it big on the App Store or Google Play. You want to have like a mobile hit. But I'm sorry, I guess the sad thing is that the harsh reality is that most games fail. And it is kind of weird though, because I mean, if you think about it, there's like 2 billion smartphones and tablets out there, and an App Store and Google Play makes it very, very easy to download stuff. So you would think that there would be like enough devices and enough people for all the games, but the thing is, people are lazy. So what they typically do is that they talk with friends to find out which games are hot and cool and that they should download. And other than that, they usually just go to like the top 5, top 10 charts and try to download games from there. So there's like huge app discovery problems. So you end up in a situation where the vast majority of all the games get very little download, and a few games get the vast majority of all the downloads. Now, to complicate this a bit further, if you are very, very lucky and you happen to have some type of like social media hit, you will get an enormous amount of downloads in a very short period of time, because that's when the like 2 billion devices really kicks in. So this obviously is a very, very slim chance of it happening, but it might happen. And that makes it a bit tricky if you're doing a mobile game that will have some type of like mobile backend, because it might be that you it might be like it's like a play versus play game, or is that you have some type of downloadable content, or it's just that you want to send push notifications to people. The thing is, I mean, the most likely scenario is that you put your game out there and it will have a few downloads, but not that many. But then suddenly, boom, something can happen, and you will get a vast amount of download in a very short period of time. So how do you prepare for that? Well, that's a very good question. And I guess the reason why I'm here to talk to you about this is that what happened to Flappy Bird about a month ago kind of happened to one of our games about a year ago. So, as I said, we have a word game called Russell. It's a game where you have a set of 16 tiles, letters, and you compete against each other in trying to find as many words as possible in 2 minutes. It's like a Boggle type game if you've ever played Boggle. So it's player versus player. It has like leaderboards, in-game chatting, friend lists, achievements. It's also cross-platform, so it's available on iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. So obviously, given this, we do have some type of like mobile backend to handle this. We launched this in March 2012, and actually almost immediately became a viral hit in Stockholm or in Sweden. It took us like 9 days to become #1 on the Swedish App Store. And we had all these kids playing in the schoolyards, and you had like Swedish celebrities tweeting about that this was like the new plague. And we appeared like in cartoons, in newspapers and all that. So that was pretty cool since we're a Swedish company. And shortly afterwards, we also hit it big in the Netherlands. And we also became #1 in like Norway and Denmark shortly after. So we were doing pretty well. But to be honest, I mean, these are small countries. So we had something like 5-6 million downloads, I guess, something like that. So we were doing pretty well. We thought we were doing pretty well. But then in December 2012, something happened. We suddenly became a viral hit in United States and Italy at the same time. Now, this was actually pretty cool because we have Google Analytics integrated in Russell. So we could track like on a daily basis where people were playing. So we know for a fact that like in the United States, it started in a very small town down in Mississippi, where most likely high school teenagers found out about Russell and started playing against each other. And then after like a few days, we could see that it had spread from that little city to the neighboring cities. And then it spread to the capital of Mississippi, and then it spread to the neighboring states. And then it just spread like a viral disease all across America. And kind of the same thing happened in Italy at the same time. So obviously when these things happen, it has like an impact on the number of downloads that you get. So this is what our download charts look like. So the thing to remember here is that the flat line at the bottom that you see, that looks like almost nothing, that's actually a pretty healthy 30,000 downloads per day. But that grew within a few weeks to close to 1 million downloads per day. And usually, I mean, when you see charts like this, that's usually when like the marketing department, they just go like 2 thumbs up and go out and drink champagne. Whereas like the guys in the server department, they just cross their fingers, pray to God, and just hope everything sticks together. And for one reason or another, I tend to end up in the server department. Because the thing is, I mean, inevitably, if you have like an exponential increase in downloads, you will have an exponential increase in traffic. And to just give an idea of what kind of like numbers that we were dealing with, we added, as I said, almost 1 million users per day. We have pretty good retention numbers, so most of those users actually came back the day after, where we added yet another 1 million users. So we just kept on adding users, and all of those are hitting our servers. We ended up in a situation where we, like on our peak, we had about 100 million games being played every day on our servers. We sent out 150 million push notifications per day. And we had a sustained load on the servers from the games at roughly 30,000 requests per second. And to tell you the truth, I mean, we did have some problems. I mean, we had to tweak the architecture a bit. We had to do some optimizations. But for the most part, everything just scaled beautifully. So that was pretty cool. Now, how did we do that? And what are like the key things that you think about when you design a game with like a mobile backend? So you have essentially a few options, and that Google has been talking about here, is that, I mean, if you have like a simple game, it might not be like player versus player, so you just need leaderboards, for example, or it's something which is, it's player versus player, but you don't have any special consideration in how would you do matchmaking. Then you might be well off using like the Google Play services or like Game Center if you're strictly on iOS. And in the other spectrum, if you're doing real-time gaming, maybe you're doing like a Call of Duty style thing, or you're doing, I don't know, Clash of Clans type things, you actually might have to write a lot of stuff yourself and put it in the cloud in a virtual private service solution. But there is a middle ground as well, and that's using App Engine, and that's what we ended up doing. And I'm going to tell you a little story. I mean, I was the guy who ended up doing like the evaluation of how we're supposed to solve the problem of having a server in the middle. So I was doing basically evaluating of various options that we had. So we were basically contemplating either writing stuff ourselves and putting it on Amazon, or using App Engine. And we had this development chart for Russell where we had like a project plan, and a huge chunk of this project plan was allocated in doing like server development. So when I started reading about these things, I just realized that it was actually pretty simple to do this using App Engine. So I went back to the guys and I said, well, I think we kind of like have overestimated the amount of time that it would take us to do this using App Engine. And they said, no. This is hugely complex. This is a very, very difficult problem. So it's going to take a lot of time. I guess just to prove them wrong, this was on a Friday, I just went home and wrote about 80% of the stuff that we needed to do to get Russell up and launched over the weekend, including client-server communication and the client-side protocols and all that stuff. So it's hyper productive. It's really, really fast to do things in it. So that's one of the key advantages of using App Engine. So now we knew that we could do this technically, but you also need to try to do your homework on economics. So you have to try to estimate the server cost that you will have per daily active user. You also have to try to estimate the revenue that you will get per daily active user, because then you know that you can run this service as on a profit and not on a loss, and that there's like server cost won't eat up your profit margin. And the cool thing about using like cloud services is that ideally the cost will adapt with traffic. So if you launch the game and you don't have that much traffic, at least the server side part of it won't cost you that much. And if you suddenly end up in a situation where you have a lot of traffic, if you've done your math correctly, you shouldn't actually have a problem. You should just be glad. Also, I mean, there's like a lot of like third-party solutions out there that that helps you with things like push notifications, crash analysis, analytics, things like that. A lot of these services, they charge you per monthly active user, and you should make sure when you do that I mean, you might, if you have a game that has a lot of monthly active users, but you don't actually earn that much from each user, that these services might become prohibitively expensive, so you have to keep track of that. You also ideally should verify all these assumptions by launching on the trial market. We didn't do that for Russell because we didn't understand that we should, but we do that nowadays. And that brings us to analytics, and it's like a lot of people here have been saying, nowadays, if you launch a game, it's not that you launch a product and then boom, you're done. It's gaming nowadays is much more like a service. So it's vital that you know who's playing the game, who's not playing the game, who's leaving the game and why are they leaving the game. So you have to have like some type of like analytics solution that can capture all these relevant stuff like the D1, D7 retentions, daily active users, monthly active users, the revenue you get per user per day, things like that. How many, by the way, do you know what we mean by like D7 retention? Hardly anyone. Great. So the idea with like D1 retention is that typically if you install the game, that's D0. If you come back exactly the day after to play the game, that's D1. So if you have like 50% of your users coming back the day after to play the game, you have a 50% D1 retention. If you have like 30% of your users coming back exactly 7 days after installation, that's a 30% D7 retention. Now, why are these numbers important? Well, the thing is, if you know these numbers, you can actually calculate the player lifetime. That is how many days of activity your player will have. And if you know that, and you know the average number of revenue you get per daily active user, you can actually calculate how much money you will earn on each specific download, which is pretty important if you give the game away for free. So, I mean, if you don't have analytics, you don't know this stuff. So you actually have to know this. Also, you need to be able to handle cohorts so you can do A/B testing and all these things, because that's really, really super important. So you know that you don't make the game worse when you do changes. And most important, you have to make sure that your analytics solution scales as well. Because if you have like lots of traffic coming in from a lot of new users, you will generate tons and tons and tons of events, and you make sure that that analytics solution can handle this. Now, having said all this, I thought I'd give you like a sneak peek of how we actually do things, how we have solved things. So this is how our architecture looks like. We are using Google Cloud Services heavily. And the core of the whole thing is App Engine. So we essentially have built a lot of services on top of App Engine where we handle things like users. We have our own user database, so we recognize all the users within our system. All the games being played, all the chatting, leaderboards, all of that is done in App Engine. We expose an encrypted REST API towards the client so that they can communicate with App Engine. We use caching through Memcache, and we also do our own matchmaking. We have a rather advanced matchmaking that makes sure that when you try to find a random opponent, you will find somebody with the same type of behavioral patterns that you have, so you're not being frustrated by having to wait for the other opponent if you're like an eager player, and also that you meet somebody with the right skill level. So we have backends that take care of like matchmaking, things like that. We also do, as I said, analytics, and we use BigQuery mainly for all our analytics. So the cool thing about BigQuery is that it's like constant in time, but linear in cost. And that means that, I mean, if you do, it's really, really super fast as well. But the thing is, I mean, if I take 10 million rows and I do a complex query, I might get like an answer in like 13 seconds. And then I do the same query, but I throw in like 10 billion rows. It still takes 13 seconds. It's just that it costs you more. And that makes it ideal if you're doing like in-game analytics, because you will generate tons and tons and tons of events. And as long as you can do the analytics and can accept the cost of doing analytics, this thing is ideal. So what we do is that within like App Engine, we have like trigger points. So for example, when people register or they play games or whatever, we generate a lot of events. We stream these events in real time through GCS into BigQuery. And then we do like daily jobs, aggregation jobs to calculate retention figures, daily active users, things like that on different markets. And then we have built like executive dashboards on top of that so that the management can go in and interactively go in and monitor all the games and how they perform on various markets. We also complement this with further like BI systems that we integrate for example, add revenues into a consolidated place, so we can have like a monitoring tool to make sure that how much we're actually earning from ads on all the various markets, on all the like 25 various ad networks that we're using globally. So we're using Computer Engine and Cloud SQL for that. We also do third-party analytics. We have other like third-party systems that we integrate into this as well. We also do push messaging. So for like Android and Windows Phone, it's more or less straightforward. Whenever we actually want to send a push message, we do it straight from App Engine straight onto the various endpoints. iOS is a bit more complicated, so we actually have our own push notification gateway that we run in the cloud, and so we use that to communicate from App Engine, and then we send that through to Apple servers and down to the devices as well. So to make this a little less abstract, I guess, for all of you, I thought I'd go through a bit of a case study of how we actually work with these things on a daily basis. So a typical example would be that our marketing department would essentially come back to us and say, okay, it looks like the monthly active users have been started to drop in France. So we want to do some type of like targeted reactivation campaign for those French users. So what we typically would do then is that through BigQuery, we try to identify the valuable players that we want to get back into the game. So we extract those users. We then do like a MapReduce job into the big table database, the data store, to extract those actual user data that we have, and queue those into a task queue, which is like Google's asynchronous queue handling that they have. So that we queue those so that we can send push notifications to these people. We also typically try to identify usage patterns. So if you're, for example, typically play, say, Russell on the way to work in the morning, we would know that between 8 and 8:30 in the morning, that's usually when you play. So if we want to retarget you as a user to say come back and play, that's obviously exactly in the time slot that we want to send the push notification to you. So we try to do that. And also finally, after we've done all this, we would then use BigQuery to try to analyze the outcome of this, how many % of the users actually did come back and play, and how much money more can we earn from this, so we know that we're doing it in the right way. We also typically try to do this like with the A/B tests, so we try to change messages and to try to see which messages are working better than others, things like that. So I guess that's more or less it for me. I'm really super happy that we went with the various cloud services that we're using. It's been working fantastically for us, so I can highly recommend it, but it needs my worry, so it depends on what type of game you're doing and all that stuff. But for us, it's been fantastic. So that's about it. The last thing is that we are hiring. So if you if you're a really skilled game developer, you're happy to move to Stockholm because it's a beautiful city, then come to see me afterwards. Other than that, questions?
Hi.
Hi.
What were the differentiating factors that made you choose Google App Engine over something like AWS Elastic Beanstalk?
To put it this way, first of all, I mean, why Elastic Beanstalk is a lot more of just doing. It's like a mixture. It's halfway from just doing like a virtual, like AWS, it's like halfway to that and an App Engine. So you don't get as much things for free. The cool thing here is that you have like an API directly into Bigtable. You have a shared memcache. You have like backends that you can run for other tasks. You have like task queues for asynchronous handling. You have a lot of these things that you just get for free, and usually it's just a few lines of code to do this to get things done. Whereas using like Elastic Beanstalk is much more of doing like ordinary Java development that just scales. So I guess that's my answer to that.
Thanks.
We've got one over here.
Hi, thanks for sharing all of that data and how you do things, and congrats on your success. Just a question was related to the last panel. I don't know the game that well, but looking at the art style, and you mentioned that it's played in kids' playgrounds or at schools. Is this a young kids game, or is it pre-teen? And if so, can you comment on how you monetized, what model you use, and also what kind of infrastructure you might have for things like all the player-to-player chats with regards to younger players and safety, and if that touches your game? I'm not sure.
I'm actually quite glad to say that we have a very broad audience. We have people who are playing Ruzzle. Obviously, they need to be able to read. Otherwise, it would be difficult since it's a word-based game. But we have people that play Ruzzle that are from like 12 to 85, probably in age. I'd say that like in Sweden, Ruzzle was probably the first mobile game that people were playing for a lot of people. We had like a lot of old people who just came in because they loved the playing experience. No, we don't target just young players. We just, I guess, like to have like a playful style of our artwork, but it's actually for a broad audience. Other than that, we try to monitor chats. So if we have, obviously we have incidents with chats. Some things happen. So if people report things to us, we actually sometimes we report to authorities that things have happened. So we try to do that actively.
Hello. I have two questions actually.
Yeah.
First of all, what is your magic behind being or going viral? So, like having a game for 1 year or so, and then just from one day to another going to 1 million downloads, and then when you went viral and you had 1 million daily active users, did you do any other marketing? Did you use those money to get even more users?
Yeah, first of all, a clarification is not that we have like 1 million daily active users. We added 1 million daily active users per day. So what's the magic? That's a very good question. If I actually knew all the magic that we have, then we would have probably like 30 games of the same caliber. No, but there is something in the gameplay that appeals to a broad audience that's very sticky. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. We do added and have things that supports virality. Like, for example, in Italy, Facebook was a huge part of the virality. People were inviting each other a lot on Facebook. In United States, it was that we had Twitter integration. So Russell was actually like the top tweeted word for a while in the world.
Hello. You said that, or in that graph was shown that you had 30,000 new users up until December, which in my opinion is enough to get the game going viral. So I just don't understand what was the point with
the tipping point, why it actually struck. That's a good question. As I said, when we launched in Sweden, it took us 9 days to become a viral hit. It's just that we had a super duper cool game. That's the short answer. So yeah, there is some magic to it, obviously, and there's also obviously some internal magic of things why we think that we actually became hits in various countries. I can't share all that data. As to do we do user acquisition? Yes, we do as well. We, on some markets, we hit because we knew that we are potentially viral, so we do user acquisition, and then you hit the tipping point, and then you go viral like this. In other markets, like in the States, we had planned to do user acquisition and marketing activities, but we hadn't started, so that was just spontaneous. These things can happen. Like Flappy Bird, for example, that's just spontaneous as well.
Yeah, if you don't mind telling us, what percentage of your players pay to play?
No, I can't share that data, unfortunately.
Roughly.
I can't. But we're actually, I mean, we're like Russell, the game Russell is actually not a proper free-to-play game. It's a freemium type of game, so you have like a free experience with ads, and then you can buy premium. And we have a pretty good conversion rate of people actually paying for premium, that I can say. The follow-up, Russell Adventure, which is like in pre-launch, that's like more of a proper free-to-play game.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kai.